Duchess objected to her son that in this case the daughter-in-law would not get anything else, but the girl said that one necklace was enough. Lady Edith realized with horror that in no case would she sell the necklace given to her husband, even if she found herself in the most deplorable condition. In the evening, the girl sat by the fire, sorting through the mail, throwing invitations into the fire and wondering if the previous Edith had attended parties. Among the various letters, Edith found an envelope with the coat of arms of the Count of Regelhof. Immediately, the girl grabbed the letter and decided to read it carefully. Edith read her father's letter without missing a word, but the text shocked her. Count Regelhof wrote that a lot of time had passed. The girl had become accustomed to life in a ducal family, and it was time to do her part of the work. The father's letter said that he had heard rumors that his daughter was working on the documents of the duchy with her mother-in-law. The count wrote that he was keenly interested in information about the armor and weapons of the Ludwig family, and Edith was obliged to steal it or give it in the form of a synopsis. The girl thought that if the count knew about his daughter's work with documents, then there were spies of Regelhof in the castle, among the servants. The letter angered the girl. She decided to write a reply where she said that she had really lived in the duchy for a long time and realized how beautiful it was. Edith wrote that if anyone dared to disrupt the stability of the duchy, he should prepare for the loss of his entire family. The daughter tried to explain to the count in a letter that the title of nobility was entirely the will and power of His Majesty the Emperor, and it was not worth hating the Ludwig family. The girl explained that the Emperor and the Princess were alive, their power was strong, and it made no sense for Archduke Lanston to claim the throne. Finally, Edith advised her father to abandon the idea of treason, start cooperating with Duke Ludwig and recognize his patronage. Killian's wife finished the letter and breathed a sigh of relief, for she had finally told her father what she wanted. Edith thought that the phrase "out of the frying pan and into the fire" would be a good fit for the situation she was going through. The girl understood that it was unlikely that Count Regelhof would give up his own ambitions, but concluded that this was not the concern of his daughter, a married lady. Edith was pleased with the work she had done, but she did not know that soon Duke Ludwig would say that she had humiliated her father and trampled the honor of the house in the mud. A few days later, Edith found herself in the Duke's office, where he sternly asked if she had handed over the documents of the Ludwig family to outsiders. The girl answered in the negative. Then Duke Ludwig demanded to swear by her father's honor to confirm the authenticity of the words. Lady Edith swore without fear or doubt on the honor of the Count of Regelhof, and in addition swore on her own honor and life. At the Duke's table stood his sons and assistant Renan Filch. The man told his daughter-in-law that he had just humiliated his father and trampled the honor of the house in the mud. Edith asked incomprehensibly what it was about, and the Duke asked Baron Renan to show her some documents. The girl guessed that the Baron had handed over the documents with which she was working. The Duke confirmed Edith's guess and said that the papers had no value. The man said that he himself asked Renan to prepare them and give them to Edith, and soon Count Regelhof sold the items from the lists described in these documents. The Count's act confirms the transmission of false information and Edith's guilt. Baron Renan looked at the girl with fright and anxiety. The daughter-in-law, with a serious face, said that she did not understand what the essence of the accusation was, because she clearly did her job and did not pass anything on to anyone. Cliff grinned at his brother's wife's behavior, and his father sternly said that he was amazed at how the girl desperately proved her innocence. Edith did not stop fighting for justice and asked the stern Duke if the documents were shown only to her. The documents were seen by the Duke's secretary, the servants serving the office, and in the end, the Duchess and Lady Eliza helped to sort out the documents. Then the Duke addressed his daughter-in-law as Edith Regelhof and asked how she dared to blame the members of the Ludwig family. These words greatly offended the girl. She thought that it was the same in the original. After the wedding, the main book Villainous was addressed by her maiden name and not by the surname Ludwig. Edith's nerves gave out, and she asked, screaming, what Lady Eliza's name was, but the Duke sternly advised her to watch her tongue. The girl with ruby hair furiously repeated her question about the Duchess and Lady Eliza's involvement in the leak. Edith knew from the very beginning that if any suspicious incident occurred, she would be to blame. At the end of her case, Edith mentioned the false papers and said that the Ludwig family had never trusted her at all. The girl guessed that this was a well-thought-out plan. She was specially assigned to such a job, but they were not going to give real important papers. The Duke wanted to provoke the Count of Regelhof, decided to take advantage of his daughter-in-law, creating a situation that attracted him to betrayal. The Duke and Edith's husband were surprised by the girl's ingenuity, but she was just trying to finally figure it out and guess who was to blame for the data leak. The girl did not understand how the information got into the hands of Count Riegelhoff if she wrote to him that she would not become his accomplice. Edith thought it was a pity that Renan had been mean to her, but he was not such a rotten man as to leak data to competitors, and Lady Eliza could not pass on information to outsiders either. Edith concluded that Count Riegelhoff had spies in the castle who stole the information. The Count's daughter could not understand why a fictitious marriage was needed then. In the original, the evil Edith was really engaged in the transfer of documents of the Ludwig family, and information poured like a river to Count Riegelhoff. According to the plot of the book, the Ludwig family fed the Graf false information, so they easily and without damage deceived him. In the novel, Edith's character had a probationary period, but she violated it, then was exposed and received a serious punishment, becoming a forever outcast of society. The Count's daughter realized that the story from the book was still repeated, no matter how hard the girl tried to correct the mistakes of the villain and change the course of the turning points. Edith realized with regret that she could not change the course of the affair and would now fall to the bottom until she finally died at the hands of her husband. Tears flowed from the girl's eyes, but she tried to pull herself together in front of Duke Ludwig and the young masters and reminded them of her oath of honor and life. In a calm tone, the daughter-in-law asked to cut her throat. If the Duke was sure of her guilt, Killian did not like such a request. Even Cliff leaned over to his father and asked him to investigate further, but Duke didn't raise an eyebrow. A guy with golden eyes offered to take the suspect into custody first. The Duke appointed a probationary period. Hearing about the probationary period, the girl finally despaired and thought that this situation fully corresponds to an episode from the novel. The Duke was about to instruct the Baron to escort his daughter-in-law to custody, but Killian took the initiative, grabbed his wife's hand, and dragged her out of the office. Edith tried to resist and stop her husband, but he only growled angrily at the command to follow him. Everyone present watched what was happening and was amazed at how much the husband burned with hatred for his wife for suspicion of betrayal. Killian dragged his wife into the corridor and furiously asked if she had gone mad because she herself had offered the Duke to deal with her. The Duke's son told his wife that his father had the nickname Chopping Heads in the war. He did not hesitate to send the army and prisoners to slaughter. Killian's wife was surprised that her husband was so worried about her request to slit her throat, but Killian replied that he just wanted justice. The husband said that justice should prevail. If Edith was a criminal, she deserved punishment, and if she was innocent, she would not suffer. Edith noted that the ducal family did not trust her daughter-in-law, so she also had no reason to believe in the integrity of her relatives. The girl smiled mischievously, said that everyone in this family still considered her a criminal, and imposingly went to her chambers. Edith leaned against the table and explained that her life depended on the Duke, who gave her false papers and said that her father had used them. The girl looked at her confused husband and said that if the Ludwig family was investigating, she would be finished. The Count's daughter sighed and sadly said that she had to sit within 4 walls and obediently await the verdict. Killian swore on his honor and promised that he would conduct a fair investigation without prejudice or prejudice. The husband explained that he would make sure that only unfavorable circumstances did not fall on his wife's side. The young master guaranteed that as the investigation progressed, he would keep in touch with Edith and inform her of the important events of the case. The girl was flattered by her husband's words, thanked him, and then smiled intricately and asked a sharp question that embarrassed the guy. Edith reminded Killian of his desire to remain open-minded, and asked if Eliza was among the suspects, what he would do. The next day, a row of guardsmen from His Highness's regiment lined up in the square near the Imperial Palace and met the carriage. Baron Filch got out of the carriage, and Cliff, who gallantly helped Lady Eliza out, suddenly called out to the blonde girl. On the cobblestones, I could hear the hurried steps of a girl with a short haircut and a tight-fitting suit. It was Princess Catherine Iberia. She enthusiastically shouted that she missed and was glad to see the blonde beauty, because in her company she became cheerful and friendly. Her Highness the Princess of Paintings was the younger sister of the current emperor and was his only blood relative. Once Princess Catherine flatly refused to wear dresses, even at solemn events she appears in breeches. Her Highness the Princess was the only aristocrat in the empire with a short haircut, and her behavior was also bad. She was the most selfish and spoiled princess in the history of the empire. The servants nicknamed Her Highness the Walking Terror of the Palace. When all 3 guests got out of the carriage and greeted Her Highness, she protested, asking to be called only by her first name. Her Highness leaned close to the face of the fair-haired beauty and asked if her feelings had not faded away during the separation. Cliff asked the princess to stop embarrassing Eliza. Then Catherine thought how easy it was for her former lover to communicate with her now. Catherine told the guests not to worry because she was joking, but the Duke's son said that the princess's jokes were difficult to distinguish from mockery. When the princess and her guests entered the castle, the girl asked where Killian was and why he had not come too. Lady Eliza explained that her brother got married, so he could not leave his wife. Cliff noted that marriage can hardly be called marriage. The young master smiled maliciously and said that this marriage would be more correctly called a political union with the county of Reigelhof. The princess asked the guests if they had come solely to discuss the nasty people with the names of Reigelhof and Lanston. Cliff confirmed Her Highness's conjectures and said that the matter could go smoothly because Edith Reigelhof was more stupid than he had expected. Catherine rolled her eyes indignantly, and Cliff smiled because he knew that the princess couldn't tolerate political talk. Catherine snatched Lady Eliza from the young master's company and said that she planned to go out with the blonde girl. At this time, the imperial secretary went out into the corridor and announced that the emperor was free and ready to receive guests. The princess said that it was a good thing. Cliff would now have someone to discuss political news with, said goodbye and said hello to the Duke and Duchess. The young master looked after Catherine as she led Eliza away and promised to show her the horse in the stables and remembered the incident of the previous day. Cliff met his brother in the hallway and asked if everything went smoothly, but Killian only angrily told him to leave behind because his head was splitting. Cliff asked if Killian wanted to go with him to the imperial palace if he wasn't in the mood, which made him very angry. With a shout, Killian rushed at his brother and asked why he was going right now, since it was too early to go to the emperor with an investigation report. A young man with golden eyes replied that his father had sent him. He tried to object that the investigation into the case was not over, but he forgot. A little girl was lying in a hospital bed and crying quietly. Suddenly, a quiet child's voice asked if it hurt much. She lifted her torso and saw Ida, her roommate, beside the bed, and the crying girl assumed that she had woken her up with a whimper. Ida replied that everything was fine, because she also often cried and asked the girl if she was crying because of the threat of her own death. The little girl confirmed the guess of her roommate and said that it would be better if she just killed herself, because she caused so many problems. She said that her parents are going through great difficulties because of her illness, and her older brother constantly quarrels with them. The boy can become a bone marrow donor. He is very afraid of surgery and refuses to help his sister. He wishes her a quick death. The little girl concluded that she wanted to die immediately and save her loved ones from their problems, and Ida sat down more relaxed, leaning on her hands. Ida replied with a smile that not everything in life is as she wants, and said that she was jealous that the neighbor had a relative with the same bone marrow. Ida decided to share her dream and said that most of all in life she wants to be 20 years old. A roommate thought out her dream in detail. As a 20-year-old, she gathers her long hair in a ponytail and applies makeup. Ida imagined a 20-year-old beautiful girl going out into the street to walk among people and observe the course of their lives. The neighbor admitted that now she is not afraid of any difficulties. She will cope with everything as long as she has the opportunity to do all this. The little girl looked at her interlocutor with delight. Now this life episode comes to her when it gets hard. Frightened, Edith woke up with tears in her eyes and thought about the value of life, because in the hospital Ida said that she was afraid of dying. The girl with ruby hair recalled that as soon as Ida received the bone marrow, she disappeared from the hospital without even saying goodbye. This incident forever taught Edith the rule that as long as she was alive, she would be able to endure everything and cope with any adversity. Already in the afternoon, the girl thought that the change of opinion helped her life sparkle with new colors. Even a suspended sentence did not become a problem. Edith happily thought that probation should be a punishment, but for an introvert, confinement in a room is a gift of fate. The Count's daughter planned to spend this time alone, to take care of herself and her favorite hobbies. But the plan was disrupted by the arrival of her husband. Killian wanted to dine together, but sitting at the table he was silent. Edith assumed that he simply did not want to start a conversation in front of the maids. Killian's wife realized that she was mistaken, because when the servants left the room, leaving the spouses alone, the guy was still silent. The girl was the first to start first. They asked the young man the reason for the unexpected arrival. Killian muttered that he didn't have time to talk and continued to chew calmly, wet breadcrumbs into the soup. Edith was angered by this answer. She advised the master to hurry up, and she tried to understand why her husband was attractive to her. The girl could not stand the coldness and arrogance of her husband, but he himself did not care about the complexity of the character. Lady Edith assumed that Killian considered himself handsome with a toned body and a cute face, so she thought that he could do anything. The girl mentally returned to the past, where she read a forum about marriage built on appearance. She felt ashamed that she thought about this. Edith remembered that it had spoken of the longevity of marriage, for quarrels cease when a wife looks at her husband's face. Killian's wife decided to put aside all thoughts and start dinner, because the dishes looked so appetizing. The girl was eating the contents of the plates with pleasure, and the young master looked at her reproachfully. The husband said that now the investigation is at the stage of finding loopholes for information leakage, and noted that Eliza also became a defendant in the case. The wife showed feigned interest and continued to stuff food into her mouth. The young man was surprised that she did not choke. He turned to Edith again and told her not to worry, because Lady Eliza was not the only one who was being dealt with during the investigation. The girl looked uncomprehendingly and replied with a smile that she was not going to worry because she knew that she was innocent. Edith said that the soup was incredibly delicious, but unfortunately it ran out and there was still bread left, so Killian pushed a bowl of soup for her. The young master said that it was a specially prepared extra portion of soup and wished the girl bon appetit. After dinner, the girl returned to her room and lay down on the bed, thinking about the emptiness in her soul that had now arisen. In her past life, she had many hobbies, reading web novels or origami, so Edith could spend her free time there with interest. The girl regretfully realized that there was nothing of this in the world of the novel, and asked the maid Anna what the ladies do on such days. Anna called embroidery and drawing the hobby of local ladies and added that active aristocrats are fond of horseback riding. For a moment, Lady Edith imagined how she would embroider and thought that she would not be able to deftly handle a needle. The girl remembered that in a past life in the fine arts circle she drew a puppy, and the teacher saw an elephant. Edith concluded that it was a bad idea to take up painting again, and thought about horseback riding, but realized that she was very afraid of horses. Killian's wife smiled sheepishly and asked Anna to think about more leisure options. The maid remembered that it was now fashionable to embroider dresses and dress up wooden dolls in them. This hobby is popular with the children of aristocrats. Parents do not spare money on this hobby as it contributes to the skill of sewing. Edith thought that it was like the hobby of children from real life, dressing up Barbie dolls. As a child, the girl could not afford it. The girl learned from Anna that wooden dolls are made by her parents or bought in the shops of artisans who carve them. Edith became interested in the prices of dolls and took out her wallet to give Anna enough money to buy dolls, fabrics, and a sewing machine. A girl with ruby hair handed the bills to Anna and ordered the change from the purchases to be kept for herself as a bonus. The maid was surprised by such a kind deed and said that she did not need a bonus because serving the mistress was her job. Edith understood that the maid Anna and Baron Renan were the only characters who treated her well, even if it was not profitable. The lady insisted that Anna take the money, explaining that the amount was not enough to be considered bribery and hurt the maid's pride. Lady Edith urged the maid to consider it a gift as a token of appreciation and not to dare to refuse, or the lady would be offended. Edith spent the evening on her new hobby. At first it turned out well, but in the end, sewing outfits was not good for the mistress. During the day when I was waiting for the maid, I imagined how I would relax while sewing, but in reality, everything turned out to be not so simple. As usual, Anna prepared to the fullest, made purchases for a long time, and went to the tailor and ordered patterns in several versions. The dolls were bought as a ready-made set of a man and a woman. The maid said that if there were any more wishes, then contact her. The girl with the ruby hair noted that the maid had become kinder to her, but her face was still sad. Sewing dresses turned out to be difficult, but Lady Edith was relieved by the thought that it was just a hobby and not everything had to work out. Edith reflected on the fact that a hobby exists for this, so that people can spend time and money on it for entertainment and recreation. The girl thought that in her past life she did not count on a vacation without thinking about the time spent and the justification for spending money. Edith looked at the dolls and thought that it was only now that she was living her own life, when she had moved into someone else's body of a perfect world. The girl looked appraisingly at her work and concluded that it looked good from the outside, but from the inside of the dress, it was a complete nightmare. Edith decided to celebrate the great end of today's lesson with a kiss of the dolls. Then she thought about the rest of the lesson. She put the dolls on the table, looked at them, and thought to start trying to embroider while she wanted to. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Killian rushed into the room and shouted that during the investigation, he had found a document written in Edith's handwriting. One day at Sinclair Castle, the brother and sister were enjoying tea and discussing the latest events. Layla mockingly commented on the news that Edith Riegelhoff managed to get a travel ban after the wedding. Demian asked if his sister had heard of his new wife stealing the Duke's documents. The guy suggested that Edith must have been in a hurry to do so, because her father had been planning to attack the duchy within a year. Demian told his sister that he had guessed about the plans of the Count's daughter, because even under the threat of a probationary period, she stole the information. Layla stiffened at the thought that the Count had obtained classified material, but Demian assured her that the Duke would not give her daughter-in-law the valuable documents. The brother assumed that Edith had false papers in her hands and Count Riegelhoff was trapped. Demian voiced his concern about Killian, who takes care of his young wife in an unusual manner for him. Layla smiled and suggested that her brother inform the Duke that his daughter-in-law, who had been placed under arrest, was just a bargaining chip. Demian was pleasantly surprised by his sister's cunning, but replied that it was not worth trying to ruin the Duke with this information and get into this game. The guy said that in this situation he was most worried about Lady Eliza, because after Killian's marriage, her marriage to Cliff became more likely. Hearing the words, Layla was thrown into a fever. She began to shout that a girl without family and tribe would not dare to take possession of the heart of the Duke's son. The brother replied that it was too late, because Cliff was already in love, and if the events worsened, he would annul the marriage contract with Layla. This greatly puzzled the girl and prompted her to offer to use Edith Riegelhoff because Lady Eliza would be destroyed. Demian asked his sister to clarify, and Layla replied that the wife would be angry if she found out about her husband's love with the blonde beauty. Layla giggled maliciously and said that if she nudged Edith Riegelhoff, she would remove Lady Eliza herself. Meanwhile, in Duke Ludwig's castle, an enraged Killian ran into Lady Edith's room, which frightened his wife. He said that they had found a document written in Lady Edith's handwriting, and that she was now being summoned to the Duke for questioning. There was not a drop of excitement on Edith's face. She only said that she assumed that the ducal family was just trying to frame her. Killian was furious when he heard his wife's words that Herzog was not being honest about the investigation and wanted to accuse an innocent man. The girl was calm, partly because she remembered how in the book the Duke forgave his daughter-in-law, although she really committed a theft. Her husband did not share her calmness and regretfully assumed that his wife had gone mad. Edith did not understand why Killian was annoyed. The conversation of the couple was interrupted by a knock on the door. Baron Renan entered Edith's chambers and said that Duke Ludwig was already waiting for his daughter-in-law. From the stern face of the Duke's private secretary, Lady Edith understood that he also considered her a criminal. Lady Edith was walking to the exit and advised her husband to relax his face, because deep down she suspects that the guy is glad to find evidence. In the Duke's office, the interrogation began with the presentation to Lady Edith of a list from an arms dealer that had been obtained from the Count of Riegelhoff. The Duke claimed that the list was written in Edith's handwriting, and she, looking at the paper, concluded that the handwriting was forged. The Duke, in the presence of his two sons, said that this situation was the Count's mistake and saw no reason to blame his daughter-in-law for everything. Edith shouted that it was not a matter of punishment, that her honor was at stake, and suggested that the evidence be compared with the document she had filled out herself. The girl noted that she had never drawn up tables so clumsily. The document was forged by a person who does not know how to draw up tables. The Duke suggested that Edith had deliberately filled it out badly. She said that if she had assumed the disclosure, she would have immediately written in someone else's handwriting. Edith looked at the document again and said that the fake handwriting was slightly different from the real thing. His daughter-in-law suggested that the tables be compared with the entries in his personal diary, so the Duke instructed Baron Renan to bring the diary. Edith looked at the document and wondered who could have framed her and why, but she realized that the objective reason was that she was being led to the original story. The Duke and his sons carefully studied the documents and the girl's personal diary and noticed that the spelling of several letters was different. Duke Ludwig looked through the papers again and admitted that the documents had indeed been neatly forged by someone. Edith, in a stern tone, advised her father-in-law to look for the mole who had leaked information to Count Riegelhoff. Lady Eliza knocked on the door of the office and entered. Cliff was extremely surprised by the appearance of the blonde girl. The Duke told those present that it was not surprising. It was he who had called Lady Eliza, then informed her that she had come at the right time. The girl's interrogation began with a reminder that she had been working with Matushka for 4 years, but only now they began to use tables. Eliza nodded vigorously and said that the Duchess was glad that Edith had taught her how to organize information with the help of tables. Lady Eliza confirmed all that had been said, and the Duke asked who else knew about this method. Eliza pointed to Killian and Cliff because they could have a general idea of the tables. Herzog concluded that, at best, the new information organization technique could only be used by family members and Lady Edith. Eliza added that she did not understand the proposed method. Edith was surprised, because she clearly remembered that the blonde girl then understood everything. Lady Eliza then asked the Duke why she was being asked these questions, but the man advised her not to poke her nose into someone else's business and leave. After Eliza had gone, the Duke looked suspiciously at his sister-in-law and said that the matter had been cleared up, and all the arrows were pointing at Edith again. Edith was amazed at this turn of events because she had presented enough evidence of innocence, but the Duke still did not believe it. The girl did not understand what to do now because she believed that the kind and fair Edith would provide at least some evidence. Lady Edith stood and thought that Eliza was simply taken at her word, for she had not produced any written evidence. At that moment, Lady Edith noticed that her personal diary had disappeared, but Killian, who was carefully reading the diary, came into view. Lady Edith sprang up to her husband, tore out the diary, and said that such disregard for politeness was not in his manner. Suddenly, the Duke changed and said that there was no reason to blame his daughter-in-law, decided to forget this incident for her and cancel the probationary period. A girl with ruby hair quickly ran out of the office, followed by Killian. He tried to say that he could not trust. Edith said she wasn't surprised at all, because it had always been that way because she was from the Regelhoff family. Her husband replied that she should not be offended, because her bad reputation had spread too much among people. Lady Edith shouted in resentment that she was tired of proving to her husband that she had changed a lot and had nothing to do with the Count's tricky affairs. Killian invited his wife to remember her past deeds, and footage of her atrocities flashed before the girl's eyes. Edith remembered how she had spoiled the parties and dinner parties of families favorable to the Duke's family, seduced the men of these families. Several times she even interfered in the fate of the children of these families and ruined their planned marriages. Edith bowed her head at the realization that she had once been such a terrible person, and Killian offered to accompany his wife to her chambers. The girl refused. Killian was standing in the corridor at the door of his wife's room when a blonde beauty appeared in the corridor. Eliza asked the young master in a sweet voice what had happened, and he replied that the Duke suspected his daughter-in-law of stealing the documents. Lady Edith was standing at the door, listening to a conversation coming from the corridor, when Eliza was amazed that Edith was suspected. The blonde girl did not believe the accusation. The guy replied that there was ambiguous evidence. It was painful for Edith to hear her husband's words. The girl with ruby hair decided to move away from the door and stop eavesdropping, because it is already known about the suspicious attitude of her husband. Lady Eliza was worried that what she had said during the interrogation might harm Edith, and said that she wanted to explain her words to the Duke more precisely. Killian stopped the blonde beauty and said that the case had already been closed. Her father preferred to forget about it and forgive Edith. The young master walked quickly along the corridor. Entries from his wife's personal diary appeared in his head, how delighted she was with the beauty of her husband. After reading the diary, he concluded that Edith had pure thoughts. The guy expressed anger at every step because she was unfairly accused. A grim Killian came to Cliff, who was enthusiastically flipping through Edith's diary, and called him rudely and insistently to the training ground. The next morning, a girl with ruby hair hesitantly knocked on Duchess Jessica's chambers. When Mother allowed her to enter, she gave the ignorants a warm smile and sympathized that Edith had to endure such suffering. The Duchess said that the burdens of the mind were much heavier than the burdens of the body, and Edith thought that her mother-in-law also believed in her involvement in the theft of documents. The mother-in-law approached her daughter-in-law, took her hands in hers, and with tenderness in her voice assured the girl that she fully believed her. Edith was surprised at the Duchess's kindness, and she went on saying that she had seen her daughter-in-law's efforts to get used to life in the castle and her new job. Matushka said that she fully understood the situation of the girl, because she herself also faced difficulties when she got married. The woman confidently said that she did not know who did this vile deed and framed the girl, but the Duchess believes in her innocence. Lady Edith was touched by her mother-in-law's words and burst into tears. She tried to squeeze the words out of herself, but her eyes darkened sharply. A servant ran to the training ground and shouted to Cliff and Killian that Lady Edith had fainted in the Duchess's office. The young masters stopped training. Cliff approached the servant and said that his daughter-in-law had spoken to Mother, so the doctor would arrive soon. At the same moment, Killian rushed past them in a hastily thrown shirt. Such a sharp reaction caused surprise on his brother's face. In the Duchess's office, the doctor asked if the patient had faced stress lately and said that she had given the medicine. The healer explained that when Edith woke up, she would feel good. She would be able to do her daily chores, but she should not overexert herself. Killian looked at his wife's tear-stained face and realized that the girl was very worried during the interrogation, but did not show it. The young master could not understand how the arrogant Edith Riegelhoff, whom he knew, could bring herself to tears to the point of fainting. The guy asked his mother what her conversation with her daughter-in-law was about. She said that Edith swore that she did not forge any papers. Killian said that Lady Edith had said the same thing yesterday, and Mother had added that she had told the girl that she believed in her innocence. The Duchess's son was amazed by what he heard. The woman explained that Edith burst into tears just because of the words about the belief in her innocence in the theft. Matushka said that the daughter-in-law tried to thank her, but lost consciousness. The mother-in-law suggested that no one believed the girl before. The young master remembered his suspicion and distrust of his wife, although she had tried many times to prove her innocence. The memories gave the guy a headache. The Duchess got nervous and offered to call a doctor. Killian protested and said that he just needed a rest, but as he was about to leave, he ran into Lady Eliza. The fair-haired beauty explained that she had come because she had heard about the accident with Lady Edith. The girl interrupted the story. Because she saw Killian's pale face and stretched out her hand to his face, he felt the familiar pleasant aroma of perfume. Suddenly, the young master grabbed Eliza's hand and pulled away from her, saying that he needed to go and rest urgently.